Everybody can come. I know there are some people who might have different point of view than us, and we don't mind that. This is a democratic country. We believe in democracy, and democracy is the best revenge for anything. I start the meeting. My name is Mushtaq Rashadi, and Dave Anderson was with us in the next door meeting. He has to fly to Northern Ireland on a parliamentary business on 3-line whip, so he's just flown. We are expecting some other parliamentarian to come and join us. There is debate going on in the chamber, and it is very important. But let me start by thanking everybody. Third World Solidarity works for peace, justice, and tolerance. We have been working for this for 29 years now. This is a long time. So Andrea is sitting here. She is much younger than 29 years, but we have been working. I'm much older, so I started it. We have got some councillors, some other parliamentarians, some other colleagues from media as well. I'm very thankful to my daughter-like, Sintra Khalid, who has come specially to record and then put on blog, and I hope other people will take some notes and put it on the record. I think it is very important that we carry on the pressure. People believe that the Parliament has passed a resolution 2-3 weeks ago to recognize the Palestine state, and that's it. It is not the end of the matter, it is the start of the matter. Because only 3 countries in the European Union, Yasir, come forward, this seat is for you. Only 3 countries, Sweden, Spain, and Malta, has accepted state of Palestine. I think we believe that 2-state solution is the best, although some of us might believe in other things or beyond it. I think I was very disappointed when David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, last week answering to a question said that he supports Israel because that is the only country in the Middle East which is observing human rights and fulfilling the democratic values. I think if democratic values are to build the walls around it, that is not the democratic attitude. All the countries in the world, international communities have condemned it, they carry on doing it. The Muslims and Palestinians who live in Jerusalem, they are not allowed to go to the mosque. There are other issues in the country, they can't export their forms, and there are other difficulties which other speaker will speak. We have got a line of speakers, but I will invite first of all His Excellency, and I hope like Sweden, like Spain, like Malta, the Britain will accept United State of Palestine to be a country and give the status to diplomatic status to our diplomats of Palestine in this country. I'm very thankful to you all because it is a late evening, and I know a lot of people have other commitments. That's why we do hold meetings earlier at 6:30, but today we had a roundtable meeting on NHS, particularly on pharmacist attitude next door. So that's why we delayed it, and His Excellency only had tonight to speak in this year, and we wanted to do it on this side of the year, that you go back and start campaigning that when MPs come to you, parliamentarian, for your vote on 7th of May, you tell them that look, we want you to accept on which side you are. You ask questions. And I think once you ask questions, they will go and state Palestine will become a reality, which is at the moment going through very, very difficult time. And we, the human rights activists, know what is happening there. Martin will be speaking on his visit to Gaza and Palestine. He was a former MP, and he is now on Palestine briefing, and he has visited recently Gaza as well. And we know what is happening in that part of the world, but we believe that only dialogue are the solution, not the war. With this note, can I invite His Excellency Professor Manuel Hassan to start and speak, because I know he speaks with passion. He's a Palestinian, he teaches in Washington, he is a very good representation of people of Palestine. Can I invite His Excellency Professor Manuel Hassan to speak?
Thank you very much, Mushtaq. I'm always pleased to speak for the Third World Solidarity, and I have always commended your work in support of freedom and justice. Of course, this is not the first time I address such an audience. It gives me great privilege tonight again to come and to talk about Palestine and the recent developments. This year we mark the 47th year of occupation. An occupation that has been long overdue. It is still shameful that the international community has not put enough pressures on this state called Israel to end its occupation. We have embarked on negotiations for 22 years. For 22 years we've been negotiating, and things are not improving on the ground. As a matter of fact, things are deteriorating. We have more settlements today than ever. We have settlers more than 650,000. We have seen housing units every month increasing in the environs of Jerusalem. We have revoking of Palestinians living in East Jerusalem their IDs. We have seen demolition of houses. We have seen destruction of infrastructure. We have seen naked war on Gaza. We have seen total isolation of Jerusalem from the West Bank. We have seen the West Bank being divided into cantons with no geographic continuity. We have seen also the West Bank isolated from Gaza. We have seen the destruction of institutions, and we have seen the continuous incursions of Israeli settlers into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and we have seen systematic policies of Israel trying to enforce a bill that would become a law saying that this is the Jewish state. And by Jewish state, it means that 20% of the population of Israel who are Arabs are going to be denied their citizenship. The Druze who are living as a minority will be deprived of their citizenship, which means all this put together, Israel is moving towards an apartheid state. Now, Israel has built this long wall, 2 meters high, 750 kilometers, deep 10 kilometers into the West Bank to make that total separation. And we have seen all these settlements scattered all over like cancer, where it would be impossible to talk still about the two-state solution. I cannot see a reason how we can still talk, and I am officially asked by my president still to talk about the two-state solution. But when I go home and see the settlements and see how they are so cancerous and spread, I cannot visualize a viable, contiguous Palestinian state. It is impossible to talk about the two-state solution while such policies are being still practiced. Okay. Now, this is a long topic, ladies and gentlemen, and it has a lot of complex areas where sometimes it's not easy to put them in 5 or 10 minutes for you and talk above your head in politics that are complicated. All I want to say is the recognition of the state of Palestine is not an impediment to the peace process. It bolsters the peace process. It's not an alternative to the peace process and to negotiations. The recognition of the state of Palestine says one thing, that the occupied territories are not disputed territories. These are occupied territories. All we're saying, the borders of 1967 are occupied. It's Israel says these are disputed territories. And the reason why we went to the United Nations and we got the recognition of the General Assembly 2 years ago is to show the international community, and by the consent of the international community, that these are occupied territories. They're not disputed territories. Now, we talk about negotiations. Yes, we have to negotiate with the Israeli side in order to draw the borders, the final borders, the contours of that state, the swapping between Palestinians and Israelis in terms of land exchange and what have you. These should be the essence of negotiations. Not security, not borders, not water, not refugees. These are issues that will be settled after we sit down and say these are the borders. Then the other issues will fall. And the only ones who will, decide on these issues are the Palestinians and Israelis. It's not the United States, it's not the UK. It's what we call partners in conflict, are the ones who will decide ultimately the fate of that state and that bilateral relationship, where I believe, democracies, two democracies can survive and can have the longevity of peace. I am here a man who represents a country that is under occupation. People that has been suffering by breach of human rights. We have international violations of human rights. Our people are not living like normal human beings. They are being discriminated against in every walk of life. And that is not acceptable. So many resolutions have passed in the United Nations, but we haven't seen any of these resolutions being implemented. It's so unfortunate that a third party, which is supposed to facilitate the process of reconciling and bridging the gap between the partners to the conflict, are impotent. As a matter of fact, they are unequivocally supporting one side against the other by not putting pressures. How could we have normal negotiations when one people is under occupation, the other is occupying force? There could never be parity in negotiations. You're not talking about equal powers, contesting a certain land dispute or what have you. You're talking about a people that is under total hostage, totally submissive to a total control through power politics, through diktat. And we claim that we are negotiating. We're not negotiating. There has never been any kind of negotiations that are serious enough to say that we give and take and we have reached somewhere. Negotiations have always been the diktat of power politics. And that's why we could not reach anywhere. Because Israel comes with its own maps and imposes on the underdog what they want. And the third party should be an arbitrator that could create the balance between the two negotiating sides. It's not playing that role. And that's why since last June we have seen the dismal failure of the United States in broking or in the brokerage of peace between the two parties. And what happened since then? Settlements are continuing to be built, revoking of these Palestinian IDs from Jerusalem, the incursions in Al-Aqsa Mosque, closing the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is the first time since Israel occupied the territories it has been closed. Now, I'm not talking about people in the West Bank who don't have access to come to Jerusalem to pray. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is closed for those who are living in Jerusalem. Imagine people under the age of 50 cannot enter the Al-Aqsa, cannot go and pray in the Haram al-Sharif. I mean, if Israel is a democracy, these religious practices, they should be tolerant. You cannot continue to subdue a whole people, even from their religious rights. You cannot desecrate the holy places in Jerusalem. You cannot claim something that is not for you. And you cannot just go in, kill and shoot people indiscriminately. All these acts have been done with impunity. Israel has been considered above international law. I'm trying not to be passionate. Today, I'm trying to be very rational. I'm speaking objectively. You tell me what kind of a democracy Israel is that is practicing every single human right violation against people. Collectively, individually, we have seen Israel putting all kinds of pressures against the population in Palestine. Now, look what is happening today in Jerusalem. What do we have in Jerusalem? Jerusalem became the most impoverished city now, with 75% under poverty level. We have seen Jerusalem being denied infrastructural development. We have seen Jerusalem health system crumbling. We have seen Jerusalem's welfare system crumbling. Yet at the same time, Israel claims that those who live in Jerusalem are considered to be Israeli residents, not even citizens. So the education system is falling apart, the health system is falling apart. We have now ghettos in Jerusalem, we have drug dealings in Jerusalem because of abject poverty. And Israel is not taking care of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem, let alone they are not allowed to be taken care of by the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. So the Jerusalemites are paying today the heaviest price. And that's why maybe you hear every day we have skirmishes, problems in Jerusalem, at the outskirts, outside the wall, inside the wall. And all acts of violence are going to step up more and more, because people cannot continue to be humiliated. And this is what we are witnessing today. Total humiliation, total negligence of the East Jerusalemites, who don't have access also neither to the West Bank nor to Gaza. Jerusalem is used to be the center of health services, the center of civil services for the entire Palestinian people. And by isolating Jerusalem, there is no connection whatsoever between the people and the families who live in Jerusalem and those on the West Bank or in Gaza. So we're talking about enclaves, totally separated from each other, with no services, no kind of help. The unemployment is more than 50% today. People are living on $300 per capita income, and you don't want them to revolt. I think today I can say it's not only the political situation that is prompting people to go into the streets in Jerusalem. It's the impoverishment. It's the economic conditions now, where they don't have access to any kind of services or to job employments or to job opportunities. And that's why, we have people and youth who are angry. Let alone, we have hundreds of thousands of students who don't have access to daily studying in schools. Thousands of them have to stay till the evening to go to school, and we have lack of chairs in schools. So there is no education, there is no hope for future, there is occupation, students are being put in jail, the youth have no hope for any future. What do you expect them to do, ladies and gentlemen? They will force themselves into the streets, and they will confront soldiers, and the escalation of violence and the intensity of violence would lead to a convulsive violence that will be out of control. I can see a third intifada coming around the corner. It's going to be this time from Jerusalem, not from the West Bank and not from Gaza. I was asked to speak specifically about Jerusalem by Mushtaq, and that's why I'm focusing more on Jerusalem than anything else. Now, in order not to take more time, we have so many speakers. What I would like to say is that there are options and there are alternatives. We are not going to sit idle and watch Israel continue its desecration of the holy sites. We are not going to sit idle and continue to see the occupation continue. We are not going to carry arms and shoot civilians in Israel, because that's not the strategy of my leadership in Ramallah. We have always believed in non-violence, peaceful resistance. We have always collaborated with the Israelis on security matters. And I believe this is the time Israel has to pay the price. And by paying the price, Israel should not get away with its war crimes against humanity. Israel should be taken to the International Criminal Court. Israel should be indicted. And President Abbas, in a couple of days, is going back to the United Nations. As soon as we secure the 9 votes, we are going to put an end to this occupation. We need the full recognition as a state, and at the same time, we need to go to the International Criminal Court. We need to internationalize the Palestinian issue again. It's not going to be at the mercy of the United States of America that has done nothing. And we are not going to sit idle and just wait for Europe to move its hands or whatever into the process. Because we have seen Europe being totally subservient. I'm sorry to say, spearheaded by the United Kingdom. Lip service is not enough. Have empathy is not enough. We need to see action. When this country spends billions of dollars in terms of armed trade with Israel, not boycotting Israeli products coming from the settlements officially, and not putting enough pressure in the Union, in the European Union, to lower the association agreement, I think the UK is not doing its responsibility. It's not shouldering its responsibilities. And the government has not recognized the state of Palestine. It's only the parliament has done this. Of course, the parliament, we thank the parliament, because behind the parliament, the people of the UK are supporting the Palestinian people for their nationhood and for their statehood. It is so ironic that we see more than 70% of the public here supporting the state of Palestine, while the government is not paying any heed to this. And this shows the hypocrisy of this democracy, when the public has something to say, overwhelming majority, and the government does not even do anything about it. So we are not that encouraged by European governments, but we are encouraged by European parliaments. Today the French have voted. Also another landslide in the parliament. Everybody was there. It is so unfortunate that only Labour and few Conservatives came to the voting in the parliament here. But there, everybody was there. So it was 339 for Palestine, 151 against. And this shows the democracy of a country that 2/3 of the parliamentarians have gone and said the word of the people, yes, we are for the recognition of the state of Palestine. Now, regardless of the government that has taken a bold position relatively to the UK, they said, we are going to give the negotiations another 2 years. And after that, if nothing comes out of it, we are going to recognize the state of Palestine. At least this is an avant-garde position by the French, to be followed by the Spanish, by other countries. But I'm not really enthused by what the Europeans are doing. It's not enough. You know, the only thing that you could do, we're not telling you wage war against Israel. We're not saying boycott Israeli goods. All we're saying, put pressures and try to lower the association agreement. Let Israel pay, like any other country, its tariff system. Why Israel is getting away with it as an occupier? This, we have question marks on this. Now, all I'm asking, basically, is the fact that we have to continue our efforts. I think, you know, the starting point, thanks to the parliament that recognized the state of Palestine, We thank all these organizations like Hughes, Martins, Labour Friends of Palestine, PSC, Jews for Justice, you know. All these organizations have played an imperative role. It's not the Palestinian ambassador who brought this recognition, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I have my dues. I have to raise awareness. I go to every activity, I speak, and I try to raise the voice of my people who are under occupation. But it's people like you who makes a difference. It's not me. And that's why, you know, I always acknowledge and commend, you know, all the NGOs, all the public that have been supportive. Because you're not fighting against Israel when you support the Palestinians. You're trying to bring fairness and justice. You want to end occupation. You want justice for all. You want Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side democratically in peace. That's what you are striving for. You're not siding with me against Israel. No. You're supporting me in getting my rights, my freedom, and the justice that everybody would like to see in the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think it is due that the Western countries leave the double standards and speak out more powerfully than they are, as you said very rightly, and I think it is moving toward that. If France has said within 2 years, I hope the British government next year, and I was with you last Wednesday on dinner when Admiral Brent has committed himself that if he wins the next election, he will work positively toward recognizing the state of Palestine, and I hope it happens. Our next speaker is Martin Litton, who has been parliamentarian MP here for many, many years. During his MPship, he visited Palestine many times, and now he works for Palestine briefly. Can I invite Martin Litton to speak?
Well, let me start by saying it's always a pleasure to be here at the Third World Solidarity All-Party Group with Mushtaq, and it's also an honour tonight to be speaking with the Ambassador Manuel and indeed with Suleiman from SOAS. So I'm going to start by answering the question the meeting is about. What next after the resolution by the UK Parliament on Palestine? Of course, it's really three questions. The first is, what other country, apart from the UK, what are the other countries going to do, and also what is the UK Parliament going to do next, and indeed what is the UK going to do next, or the other organisations, and hopefully we can answer all three questions. First of all, what other countries? Of course, that was it was always the hope when the British Parliament took its decision on October the 13th that it would start a bandwagon of other West European countries taking the same decision. There was a vote in the Irish Parliament, and then there was a vote in the, after our vote, there was a vote in the Irish Parliament, and there was a vote in the Spanish Parliament, and today the vote that Manuel has just told you about in the French Parliament by 339 votes to 151, which is hugely welcome. I hope that will lead to further votes in other parliaments. I believe the Belgian Parliament will be next on our list, and maybe the Danish Parliament, to persuade them to vote the same way. Of course, it's true that even the French vote is a non-binding vote, but the French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, said during the debate, promised that the French government will recognise Palestine, not immediately, but within a period of 2 years, by November 2016, before the date of the next US election. And it could be earlier than that, but basically they're saying they will recognise Palestine by November 2016 anyway, even if a full settlement of the conflict hasn't been reached by then. It's a deadline by which the conflict has to be settled or they recognise Palestine. So let me talk a bit about the decision in this building on October the 13th. We've been working on it for a long time, and but nevertheless, when the result was flashed up, 274 votes to 12, it took even us by surprise that the majority was was so big. And by us, I mean all those of us who've been lobbying in the run-up to this debate. 2 years ago, if there had been a similar debate in this building on the recognition of Palestine, it would have been lost. The pro-Israelis would have won. And I think what has happened during the course of this year. The MPs were very shocked, first by the deliberate torpedoing of the Kerry talks by the Israelis when they announced another settlement at the end of April. As John Kerry himself said when he was interviewed he was questioned by the US Foreign Relations Committee, when this announcement was made that they were going to build yet another settlement in East Jerusalem, poof, that was it. That was what he said. That was what ruined, what torpedoed the talks. Then we had in June, of course, we had the kidnapping of 3 Israelis, immediately followed by the burning alive of a 15-year-old Palestinian boy.
The Israelis were murdered. The Israelis weren't kidnapped, Martin, they were murdered.
Excuse me, can he talk, and then we will give you a chance to speak at the end.
And then I think the MPs were very shocked by the sheer brutality of the assault on Gaza, which, as you know, killed 502 children, of which 501 were Palestinian. And then finally, the salt in the wound, the announcement of 4 more settlements in East Jerusalem, in the East Jerusalem area in September, which was what I think shocked many MPs most of all. But of course, the reason for the vote was partly because of these shocks that to MPs, but also there had been a very successful lobbying campaign, and in the last 11 days before the vote, MPs received 57,800 emails from their constituents, sure we all want to welcome Khaled Mahmoud, who's just come into the room. I'm sure he will be joining us here on the platform. So, and those 57,000 emails, that's just from one website. And these are the websites where you can go and you can put your postcode in, and up comes a letter to send to your MP, and you can write whatever you like, or you can use a pro forma letter. So these letters are all from different people, and they're all from constituents. So if you think about 57,000, there are probably far more than that in total, but some MPs, some individual MPs, received over 1,000 emails. Now, when I was an MP, I can tell you that if I ever got more than 100 or 200 emails on a single subject, a single vote, I would sit up and listen. I would be terrified because I had a small majority, a very marginal seat. I would pay a lot of attention. So you can imagine the effect if an MP receives 1,000. In fact, some MPs, I believe, received over 1,500 emails on this topic. And so years of patient work by all the Palestine supporters and all the solidarity organisations, such as the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Labour Friends of Palestine, the Medical Aid for Palestine, Carbu, Friends of Al-Aqsa, and my own organisation, Labour to Palestine, eventually paid off in the lobbying that we did on this one issue. And because, I mean, none of you who have taken part in demonstrations in August, many of you no doubt were there for the big demonstration in London, over 100,000 people, but there were demonstrations all around the country, can be in any doubt that public opinion is way ahead of parliamentary opinion on this issue. The public has been convinced, as Manuel said, of the case for Palestinians long before the MPs were convinced about it. But the MPs are beginning to catch up, and this year they have really started to catch up. Now, in the final In the final hours before the vote, it's quite interesting to look at what actually happened here. It became obvious to the pro-Israeli organisations that they were going to lose the vote. And what they did was they advised all of their supporters not to vote, and in fact not to ask for any division. So, under the rules of the House of Commons, the Speaker has to ask, you've probably heard it on television, all those in favour say aye, and then people say aye. All those against say no. If there's a silence after that, nobody says no, the Speaker just says the motion is just carried without a division. Nothing happens, nobody knows who's voted, but it's just the House of Commons have voted yes. But if somebody says no, then, or a group of MPs say no, then it goes to a division and people have to walk around through the division lobbies and they're counted through the division lobbies. But probably what you don't know, it's a very obscure rule, after 4 minutes when the MPs have already started voting, the Speaker has to then ask the same question again. All those in favour say aye, all those in favour say no. And then he asks for 2 MPs to count the aye lobby, the MPs in the aye lobby, and 2 other MPs to count the MPs in the no lobby, and they're known as tellers. And the job is usually done by the whips, but this was a backbench debate, not an official debate. So it was really left to the Friends of Palestine and the Friends of Israel to supply the MPs to be the tellers. Fortunately, we had a meeting before the vote took place, and we suspected that the Friends of Israel were going to not only boycott the vote, not vote, but actually not supply any tellers, in the hope that the division would have to be called off, because without any tellers, the Speaker says the division is off, even though lots of MPs have already voted. It doesn't make any difference. The division is cancelled. So we persuaded a couple of MPs who are supporters of Palestine that they would have to volunteer as tellers for the noes, so that they would be officially recorded as voting against. But obviously, we would know that they hadn't meant to do that. So that every MP would then have the right to have their vote recorded, to go around through the division lobbies and be counted as voting. And the 2 MPs who volunteered were Jeremy Corbyn and Mike Wood, who I can assure you are very strongly supportive of the Palestinian cause, but they took the risk of their vote being misunderstood because they believe in democracy. People have the right to know how their MPs voted, and if they hadn't volunteered as tellers for the noes, we wouldn't have any idea how many MPs had voted, whether they voted for or against, whether they'd been there or not been there. And we wouldn't have had that headline of the House of Commons votes 274 to 12 to recognise Palestine, which went all around the world and caused a great deal of encouragement both to Palestinians and to Palestine supporters. In fact, I spoke to a woman who was in Ramallah on the morning after the vote, walking through Al Manara Square, when she was stopped by somebody who said, "Are you British?" And she said, "Yes." And this person, a complete stranger, immediately hugged her and said, "Thank you so much." So there's no doubt about it that the vote was a huge encouragement to Palestinians. Of course, I know perfectly well, we all know perfectly well, that the vote means nothing by itself. Not only was it not binding on the government, but even when the British government does belatedly recognise Palestine, and Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, has said many times that he will, it is not going to transform the lives of Palestinians. The only visible change will be that, of course, Manuel, who we always call the Palestinian ambassador, but he will formally have that title at last, rather than just Palestinian General Delegate, and the Palestinian mission will become a Palestinian embassy. In Jerusalem, the only change you'll be able to see is that a small building in East Jerusalem, on Nashashibi Street, which currently has a sign saying the British Consulate General, will take that sign down and put up a new sign saying the British Embassy to Palestine. But of course, even though that's the only visible change, I mean, the vote was hugely important as a kind of cathartic moment when the British Parliament finally found its voice and stood up for the Palestinians. And also as what sailors call a wind change moment, when suddenly the wind blows from a different direction and you can do things that you couldn't do before. Because I think, as Mushtaq said in the introduction, this vote was not the end of a process, it is the beginning of a process. And that process, of course, involves persuading Parliament in this country and the government and parliaments and governments in a lot of other European countries to take the kind of measures that will make a real difference on the future of the Palestinians. So we need to persuade MPs to vote for measures that will put pressure on the Israelis to stop settlement building and to end the occupation. I think the first should be to persuade to stop UK companies from trading with Israeli settlements. The government keeps saying that Israeli settlements are illegal, but takes no action. And indeed, the EU sustains settlements with trade worth about 198 million per year. Well, that was the figure in 2013, 198 million pounds worth of trade by EU companies with illegal settlements. So the EU, while condemning settlements, is actually keeping them going. Now the next thing to persuade them to do would be to stop giving public contracts to firms that support the occupation or trade with settlements. I mean, we know many companies that do that. G4S is an example, Veolia is another example, and of course there are already campaigns against them, but these are companies that depend on public service contracts. And if British local authorities or government said, we don't want any, we're not going to sign any contracts with you, it would have a tremendous effect. This is what I call a step ladder. We're not trying to persuade the British government to go straight to BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, because we know that that's difficult to achieve in one jump, and it's not really necessary. What we're saying is there should be a step ladder. First of all, you can do this. If this doesn't work, you go to the next step. If that doesn't work, you go to the next step. And the boycott is just at the end of the line. Hopefully, we can by taking these steps, the government will persuade the Israelis long before they get to a complete boycott. But if you remember what happened in the anti-apartheid struggle, it was the same. There was a civil society boycott, but it was when the government started getting involved in taking sanctions against South Africa that the South Africans really sat up and realised that the game was up. So, public contracts, if that doesn't work, then we should start using the European Union's bargaining power. The European Union is Israel's largest trading partner. 1/3 of Israeli exports go to the EU. But looked at from the other point of view, Israel is only one of many trading partners for the EU. Only 0.7% of EU trade is with Israel. So the EU is in a very, very strong negotiating position. They could force Israel to take the necessary steps simply by threatening to put pressure through trade. And the simplest way would be, as Manuel said, this EU-Israel Association Agreement. Basically, it's a sweetheart deal between Israel and the EU that all of their goods can come into the European market without any duty, and ours can go to Israel without any duty. Well, certainly all the industrial goods. That's worth, it's difficult to say how much it's worth, but if you take the average duty that we charge on any other non-European country on their goods, which is about 7%, then this deal is probably worth about 750 million a year to the Israelis. And if the association agreement was suspended, then Israeli goods would be charged duty just like any other non-European country, and that would impose a huge cost on Israel. They would lose a huge amount of trade. The association agreement, is worth knowing, has two clauses. One is that Israel should aim for peaceful coexistence, and the second clause, that these concessions to the Israelis are only available provided that they show respect for human rights and democratic values. Now, on either basis, the EU would be well justified in saying, well, you're not actually fulfilling the terms of our agreement. We must suspend it until you do respect the human values of Palestinians, both Palestinians inside Israel and Palestinians in the West Bank, and you must respect the democratic values by giving the vote to all the people within that are in the West Bank as well, because an occupation lasting 43 years, 47 years, means that it's essentially intended to be permanent. Now, there was a 3-hour debate this afternoon, yesterday on Palestine as well in this building, the second long debate we had within 3 weeks. And one of the Liberal Democrat MPs actually advocated, as did some of the Labour MPs, a formal review of the EU-Israel Association Agreement so that Israel would have to pay duty. And indeed, it's interesting that Britain has already, well, the EU has already suspended the EU Crimea Association Agreement. So the Crimea now has to pay duty on any goods it exports to the EU because the agreement has been suspended. So if the EU is prepared to take that sanction against Crimea, well then all the more so against Israel, which has been in occupation, in illegal occupation of the West Bank for 47 years. There's only been an occupation of Crimea for a few months, and they've already suspended the association agreement. So we have the power, basically, to free Palestine through the EU. Nobody else is going to do it. I mean, the Americans, you could wait a century, nothing will happen. Obama might want to put pressure on the Israelis, but Congress would never allow him to do so. And the EU, of course, has the power to do it, but most decisions in the EU can only be taken with a unanimous vote of all 28 countries. So I think it's not right to tell the British government, you must just press for the EU to do this. Of course they must do that, but they must take action without waiting for the EU, because an organisation that can only work on the basis of unanimity is essentially far too slow and inflexible. So I think what we should be pressing for is the British government, or the French government, the Spanish government, major Western countries to take the lead and to implement these measures, even if the rest of the EU doesn't come along with them. Because I think it would send a shockwave through the Israeli political system if they realised that countries like ours were prepared to take that action. It's up, particularly I think, up to the Labour Party to rouse the country's conscience and to take a leading role in the campaign. You can do that if you come on one of our visits. We have regular, as Mushtaq said, we do organise regular visits to the West Bank, and we're prepared. We can organise visits for any group of people who wants to go. So if you know of a group of people who want to come and see for themselves, I think the most useful thing you can do to help Palestine is to go there and see the place for yourself. I've got some leaflets here if anybody is either interested in themselves or they know somebody else who would be interested in coming. The other thing you can do is to keep pressure on your Member of Parliament, because really what's happened in the last few weeks has been the result of pressure on Members of Parliament from people like yourselves. And you can also put pressure on through the Labour Party. I mean, Ed Miliband is the first and so far only leader of a political party who has supported the recognition of Palestine. But what we need to do, of course, is to make him the first Prime Minister to show leadership that is needed for Britain to play the role it should be playing for freeing Palestine.
Martin, thank you very much. We welcome Khalid Mahmood MP, who was in the chamber and has missed already one meeting, even AGM of Tribal Solidarity, which he is elected without any money in it. But I think he's here. We have got another speaker, and then he will speak, and then we will open it to the public, and we have to leave this room by 9. So I think if I ask Dr. Tariq Sulman to be brief, it would be very good. He's a teacher in teaching in SWAS, and he has a lot of things to say about Palestine, but today I hope he will be brief. Dr. Tariq Sulman.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think I'm an academic, so I think His Excellency Emmanuel would know the risk of asking an academic to speak on that most emotive issue of Israel-Palestine conflict. But I think the issue of recognizing the state of Palestine, and not only just recognizing, but it's coming into existence, has been very eloquently put by His Excellency. But I guess Martin's euphoria about the effectiveness of these non-binding resolutions is a bit unfounded, at least at this stage. How I see is that Israel-Palestine conflict, we need to see both parties on the ground, and as His Excellency explained, that at the end of the day, they are the ones who need to determine the contours of the state and the kind of relationship they will come into existence. So as the topic was what next? So if we look at how Israeli state has reacted to that, how Israeli state is looking into different things, in spite of Palestinians being encouraged by these rightly resolutions which are recognizing their rights. On Israel, it's a right-wing government which has got two peace proposals on the table, which is one is Lieberman's, which gives a population transfer and a land transfer, and then there's Naftali Bennett's proposal of peace, which gives rather annexation of Area C, so reducing the already Bantustan there is taking place. Right now, if we see the way Netanyahu government is forcing its finance ministry into calling the next general election, which are more likely to be in March, the polls suggest that Netanyahu's Likud party is going to increase its seats, and Naftali Bennett's seats are likely to be increased. So what we are looking at is that the new parliament, which is coming into existence in Israel, is not likely to take any heed of these resolutions. They're not likely to even consider a Palestinian state, as far as my understanding of this right-wing party is concerned. I myself think that one of the areas where now Palestinians need to work on, because Palestinians are the only one who can impact the ultimate outcome by presenting a very conclusive decision on one of the areas, what exactly is required by Palestinians. We have seen some incongruency in even today's presentation. What is that two-state solution, which I believe has been buried a long time ago, is still being pursued by Palestinian Authority. And then Martin's very brilliant strategy of BDS, which contradicts that two-state solution in its entirety. So I think that ultimately Palestinians need to understand how to take advantage of that growing public opinion in Europe and the United States in their favor and create some kind of strategy. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very brief but very meaningful intervention. Can I invite Khalid Mahmood, MP for Berry Power and Treasurer of APPG on Third World Solidarity, to speak, and then it is up.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Martin, who's done a huge amount of work on this issue for a very long time. I think we can commend a lot of parliamentarians who have, for a very long sustained period, have done this, along with Richard Burton from Birmingham, who from the outset, ever since been in this place, has worked very hard, and their colleagues with them have done a tremendous amount of work to keep this effort going, because they genuinely believe the issue of people's rights, liberties and human rights. It's important to do that and challenge that. I was luckily able to get in yesterday for just about 3 minutes in the debate. And in a way, it was good. It was good because so many members of Parliament decided to participate. It was a fairly substantial debate in terms of a German debate. People don't get this long in debates in the German section, and we were very lucky to be able to get that type of German debate. And I think the whole dynamics, as far as I'm concerned, on the issue of Palestine and Israel has changed quite considerably. And I think what you said in terms of what's going to come into the next Israeli parliament, I think we should ignore that. And the reason why I'm saying that we should ignore that is because the whole paradigm is changing significantly. It's changing significantly because the old controls are not there anymore. The old controls on the media, on the so-called tight politicians that were exercised previously, that could actually go in there and do this. What we've got now is things like these, social media. And this is becoming so powerful, it's unbelievable. And Martin talked about the number of emails we got. And I got about 1,500 as well on the first time. I got a few for this debate as well. And the fact is that it's allowed direct access to people. There are also now people in the US, young people in the US, who are starting to become aware of the issue and aware of the injustice that's taking place in relation to the Palestinian people and how it needs to be addressed. So I think as far as I'm concerned, I'm not even going to bother considering what the Israelis are doing, because they're never, ever going to be constructive on this issue. And I think the group of Zionists that we've got in control, I don't want that discussion. So every time you put something in their court, they will kick it around for as long as they can, chuck it out of the ground, waste as much time as possible, and arrive at no conclusion. That's what they do, that's what they do. All the time that's what they've done for the past 60 odd years. And they can do that. Once they're doing that, they will build a wall of division. They will build the settlements. They will do everything they've done. They will penalize Gaza. They will completely isolate Gaza, isolate a huge number of people. If this happened anywhere else in the world, it would be considered a crime. But it doesn't get considered here. And had I gone on to make the speech that I was going to make yesterday, the issues that I would raise about the viability of the United Nations and other people like the US, the UK, European Union, how we deal with that. And we don't, because we haven't got that pressure that Martin was talking about. And it's coming. It's coming because there are significant Muslim constituents and people living in those places. That is where the pressure is coming from. And that's why, within a very short period of time, we've had now 3 clear discussions and a vote on Palestine. And that's very important to do that. In that short period of time, since what's happened in the summer, to get that, I think is hugely encouraging to me, because I can think now that we can see the way forward of moving forward. And what Martin says quite rightly, when the leader of the opposition walks through the same division lobby as you do to vote for that recognition, and the real advantage of that is going to be when that leader of the opposition becomes Prime Minister, he has bound himself to that vote. And that's the message that we should be sending out. This is not me just political campaigning for the Labour Party, but that's the fact. The fact is, when you even get up and ask David Cameron that question, and a lot of people have, and particularly people like Joel Kaufman, a very good friend of Palestine, somebody who has that experience of having been a Jew, but not a Zionist. And people don't differentiate that. And we just start to look at that differentiation and get those people on side. Joel's always been fantastic. The new nationality legislation that they're bringing in, hugely draconian and divisive. If that was to happen anywhere else in the world, there would be a huge amount of criticism. And we don't get that. And so therefore, I think what we've got to do is to look at how we work with Your Excellency, how we work with members of Parliament here, how we work within the community to get that message across. So in a sense, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in talking to the South, because they certainly are not interested in speaking constructively to this side. So if they're not prepared to do that, ignore them. Because the more you engage with them, the more they think they're important. And I think what we've got to do, and the strategy that I would have, is to ignore the ones that think that they're too important to engage with. When you start ignoring them, they'll start to think, what is it that we're missing? And they need to think that, because whilst they're in a strong position, they can't carry on bullying the smaller partner. They can't carry on doing that, because the tables will turn. And I only wish the tables will turn in the Gulf region as well, as they've done across the UK and as they're doing across Europe and the West. And that's what we need to do, is get some of those countries in that region to start to understand how important it is. As important as Charles Lazir, was it? Who took the actually made a speech against then Turkish father.
Yes.
Faisal, sorry. King Faisal made that speech. I only wish that some of these guys now currently in charge would have the same sort of courage to stand up and say what we want. And this issue of getting rid of Israel and not recognizing Israel is a complete red herring. Because nobody can do that. It exists, it's there, that's it. Most of the countries have said yes to it. And the Palestinian Authority have said it exists. Because it does. Let's get over that, because that's allowed to play into their doctrine of what they say about Hamas and what they do and all those things that they make about that. We've got to move away from that. Hamas has got to take responsibility for some of the actions they've taken. Now the fact that we've got some of the authority back through the PA, Palestinian Authority, looking at it, and President Mahmoud Abbas looking at some of that will to be able to make that change, and I'm sure we'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khalid Mahmood. I think he is one of the very long-standing parliamentarians who has always spoken out on that. I think it is clear that we have to work for more MPs to come on our side in this country, that we can move forward. I think the floor is open. I think it will be very short because we have to leave, as I said, at 9 o'clock. Yes. Question, please.
Yeah, this idea, Hamas, PLO, Fatah, the Palestinian Authority cannot
Your name is?
Sorry?
Your name?
Richard. The Palestinian Authority cannot act because of Hamas. The Hamas Charter calls for the murder of every single Jew in the world. The Palestinian Authority television is full of incitement against Jews. We saw the massacre of Jews, 4 rabbis a few weeks ago, not mentioned by Mr. Hassassian whatsoever. All we heard was one side of the equation, until the Palestinian Authority is brave enough and courageous enough to face down Hamas. That is the problem. Israel is not the problem. Israel wants peace. The main problem is the inability of British MPs, like Mr. Khan, Khalid Mahmood, and Manuel Hassassian, to actually face down and call Hamas for war crimes. You cowardly call for war crimes against Israel, but absolutely silent on the terrorists of Hamas, unlike Daesh, ISIS, ISIL, where you're happy to speak up against. Hamas, I don't get it. Well, I do understand it.
Thank you. I will ask them to comment.
Just very
Very old
four-line.
People's Party founder.
In fact, I have written a beautiful poem on this process.
Go ahead.
With your permission. Very brief. Gaza is hermetically blockaded, barricaded, hermetically sealed. In Palestine, freedom, children, human rights bleed. Behind the Himalayan ambitions of Zionism lurk the aggressive designs of Zionist expansionism. Apparently, the series of recognition of independent Palestinian state by many European countries is a great step forward, kind of end of stalemate. But still weapons worth billions of dollars are showered with love by Pentagon, EU on Israeli state. To run with here and hunt with the hounds cannot be a good peace bait. Let children of both Israel and Palestine meet and play at real peace gardens gate. The Israeli settlements are going on non-stop and smirk the beautiful peace, future and fate. In fact, Israeli Zionist dreams want for it all ancient biblical lands on a plate. The building of Jewish settlements on Palestinian Arab lands surely seals the peace process, future and fate. Even if the idea of two states, Israel and independent Palestine, is regarded as ideal solution till now, up to date, let there be no more delay, as peace must not suffer or be late. Both Palestinian and Israel, please be brought on the table of brotherhood and talks without rancor and hate. All the members of Security Council must bring Palestine state in actual existence before it is too late. My last sentence, my MPs, honorable friends will like it. After all, what is the harm if Israel and Palestine share together peacefully fruits of peaceful coexistence and children of both the nations play together and eat in the same plate?
Thank you very much, Marwa Khan. Khalid, we would want to respond to Richard and then we will continue.
And I'm sure. I'm sure.
Thank you.
Basically, you can pick it up at higher if you want to do proper filming of it. Basically, the issue with Hamas was partly created by the IDF. The reason why it was created by the IDF, it's not a conspiracy theory, is that when you bombed the PA out of Gaza, Hamas took over. That's what happened when you bombed the police stations, when you bombed the power stations, when you bombed the schools, and bombed the PA out of Gaza. Hamas came in and were elected. We talk about democracy. Hamas was elected by the people because the seat saw no hope at all. Had there been a sensible step taken to deal and discussion with these places, we wouldn't have Hamas. We have the Palestinian Authority who were doing a job, who were trying their best to negotiate, trying to do the work around that and to deal with it. Aggression has to stop in that region. Whatever you say about aggression, it has to stop, and disproportionate aggression has to stop. And until we're prepared to address that, there will not be a movement. You can call Hamas whatever you want, I have no problem with that. But I also take responsibility for the disproportionate action that the IDF takes as well, so be aware of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Yes,
A few minutes. Thank you very much.
Amanullah Khan, have a seat. Later on, once we finish the meeting, you can distribute your poem. Everybody should take the poem from Khalid and
Well, I just wanted to pick up a gentleman calling massacre of 4 people dead. We all sat in our cozy sitting rooms over the last summer when Jewish citizens sat above the mountains with their chairs, with their cold drinks, and enjoyed the bombardment of defenseless Palestinian children and them being burnt alive. I could not ever come to terms with that kind of inhumanity in this day and age. When I read Anne Frank's diary as a young girl and the things that she wrote in it, I could never imagine that more girls in Palestine will be living in worse situation than that. If apartheid was not good for South Africa, certainly it is not good for Palestine. If the apartheid and Berlin Wall was not good for Europe, it is certainly not good for Palestine. If human rights are good for Western power and Western countries, certainly they also belong to Palestine. And that is what we should all speak up for and stand up for. Although this vote in British Parliament is just a moral victory for Palestinians, but it has to begin somewhere. And often it starts with the moral courage, and then it leads to action, and it leads to more better things. 135 countries in the world have already accepted, although people can disagree with it. 3 countries in Europe, Spain, Sweden has taken the lead, and Britain now. And apart from that, Latin American countries are also leading the way. Chile and many more countries are of the mind that they will soon be on board. So we just need to take courage from whatever little steps are taken, and we'll keep on fighting. Million people marched in London, and they couldn't stop Tony Blair from going to war in Iraq. Million people march every day here for Palestine. They cannot stop Israeli aggression, but they can still stand and feel the pain, and we will continue doing it until we win. Thank you very much.
Any other question? If there is no question, I will ask His Excellency to conclude, and then we will have a group photo, and that will be the end, His Excellency. But let me say 2 things. I think number one, it is very important that in this country, as Martin has said, 70% of the people of this country are in support of peaceful coexistence of Israel and Palestine. And I think we should work on that and build on that, that whosoever is elected next year, they recognize it and work for it. Although it is very hard, as Martin has said, in Europe to go ahead with it. But I think it is our duty to keep that pressure on everybody and anybody in this country, that we, next year election on 7th of May, the results are so that we not only work for a peaceful world, a better world for our coming generation, but we also work all levels of the world to take double standard out of our normal lives. If a resolution on Iraq, or resolution on Libya, or resolution on certain areas is implemented within days with force, why not a resolution on Palestine or Kashmir? And by the way, a Kashmir meeting will be here on 15th of December in Wilson Room. I usually try to book the better rooms. They are named better as well, because I love Harold Wilson and his government. When he was in government in 60s, he never supported USA going in Vietnam, and I hope we will have one day Prime Minister of the United Kingdom who doesn't follow United Kingdom. His Excellency is going to conclude, and then I will say thank you.
Is it Richard?
Yes.
Yes. Richard, I like people like you who come around here and try to raise, questions like this, because, it gives us ample opportunity not to preach the converted, but to convert you personally from siding all the time with the Zionists in your deliberations. Let me ask you one thing. Haven't you heard when President Abbas condemned the attack on the 4 rabbis, where everybody talked about it, even the Palestinians, some of them criticized them? He went out publicly and condemned that. Don't shake your head. Go check your story before you come here and talk about, murder.
He incited
He
incited it in the first place.
He did not incite it.
Richard, there is no debate.
Listen, my friend.
He asked me a question.
I'm asking you to do your homework before you come and make accusations. Secondly, if you think this is murder, if this is murder, what about Israel that has been killing thousands of innocent civilians? This is state terrorism, my friend. So don't equate, Hamas and incidents like this with what Israel has been doing for the last 47 years. Controlling people, killing them, humiliating them, making them living under occupation. And you claim that they are democratic, and we, the freedom fighters, are becoming the terrorists. This rhetoric you cannot sell such rhetoric, because people are aware. And the lady has said, she has been mesmerized on television to see how this democratic country has been bombarding innocent civilians. I have not much to say because you don't have any argument with me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have a group photo here and then Your Excellency,
Yeah.
GOTV want to have a word with you in front of you.
Yeah.
Yes, a group photo. Please come around me and I think you come here. And if you stand behind, we will have a group photo. Amanda Khan, a photograph.
Yeah.
Sidra Bede, you can come as well. Assalamu
Yeah, I'd like,
Just a minute, they will come.
I'd like you all in a bit more.
Move together, don't worry. Could you look at the camera first?
Oh dear,
I think somebody might
if I actually live long enough. Right, I'm just going to do it on the video for a sec, and I'm going to... Right,
अच्छा खान साहब इधर आइए तो स्क्वीज इन कर लें ताकि सबका आ जाए
yeah. No. I'd like a bit more squashing if we can.
Come here, we are friends.
Yeah. Yeah, you're allowed to speak for each other.
Thank you very much.
Can I-
Wait. Yeah. So, do a couple more for good luck. Some people don't.
अपना लेने की क्या जरूरत है?
Few pictures, please.
Madhud साहब,
Nice one.
3, 4. Madhud, ये भी दे.
That's right.
Once you are done, ये भी दे. Thank you. Please. Oh my God.